one day, this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
As a result of the kind of constitution that we have, it was wrong, just out of pure logic, for black people to be discriminated against solely on the basis of color. The 1964 and 65 Civil Rights Act was clearly something that needed to be done in order to hold up the whole notion of justice in our country.
Again, to paraphrase Dr. King, I may not get there with you, but someday we shall enter the promised land where men and women will not be judged by their sexual desires, but by the content of their character.
Many failed to notice Mr. Kramer's substitution of the word sexual behavior for skin color as he misquoted the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. on the steps of the U.S. Capitol. Thus began the 1993 March on Washington for lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender equal rights.
The 1993 March on Washington for lesbian, gay, and bisexual equal rights and liberation comes 30 years after the 63 march that Dr. King immortalized with his I Have a Dream speech. And for us, this is a continuation of that civil rights struggle.
Now homosexuals are using not only the language, but they are beginning to insist that the statutes, the laws, all of the advantages gained by civil rights leaders such as Martin Luther King be now applied to homosexuals.
We are an emerging, sort of the emerging latest great civil rights movement of the 90s.
Gay rights now! Washington, gay rights now!
Currently, there is a movement in this country that threatens to undermine and belittle the entire civil rights effort of the 1960s.
Homosexuals have equal rights under the First Amendment, the 14th Amendment, and the state constitution of every state in which they reside. But the issue here today is special rights. It's special category of protection. They want to be elevated from a behavior-based lifestyle to a true minority status that would give them special rights.
Once we get our rights, we want to have fun.
It's an effort by homosexuals and lesbians to promote their lifestyle. They don't want equal treatment. They want to be able to push their ideas, to get the acceptance of their lifestyle, and then to get special benefits as a result of it.
This Civil Rights Act amendment would completely neutralize the Civil Rights Act of 1964. What it will do is that it will say that anyone with any type of sexual preference, which would include everyone, would be protected under this law. So therefore, there would be no protection for minorities specifically.
Our community is at the verge of the bursting point. People are dying and they're prepared to do anything. Very many people have nothing to lose. And if the government does not respond in a positive way, I predict that you're going to see massive disruption in this society.
According to the U.S. Supreme Court, any person seeking protected minority class status must satisfy 3 elements: immutable characteristics like race and gender, financial discrimination, and political weakness. The group must be clearly identified by unchangeable physical characteristics such as skin color or gender that defines them as an insular and discrete group.
As a white male, I have no rights whatsoever other than what is shared with everybody else. we have granted certain rights to take care of past discrimination, invidious discrimination based on such things as race or on gender. But it seems to me that, again, these are benign characteristics having nothing to do with behavior.
Minorities have come in and said, we resent the homosexual community comparing the skin color to that kind of lifestyle. The skin color is not something we could control, but homosexuality is a preference. It is something that can be dealt with, can be controlled.
Homosexuality is a lifestyle, and the Hispanic community is an ethnic group. The Hispanic community does not want to be compared with homosexuals.
Government has no business putting its stamp of approval on a behavior-based group, let alone elevated to full minority status.
The high-handed attempt on the part of gay and lesbian movements to hijack the 1964 Civil Rights Act in order to try to give national credence to their moral lifestyle is an offense to Black America.
There are few people willing to stand up and rebut this whole notion that there is any kind of comparison to the sexuality of homosexuals and the skin tone of black people. It is a horrendous lie. Black people are not born choosing to be black. But homosexuals, on the other hand, despite what all of them seem to want to indicate to us, choose their homosexual lifestyles.
The group must have suffered a history of discrimination resulting in the lack of ability to earn an average mean income, obtain an adequate education, or enjoy cultural opportunities. Compare these results of a nationwide survey reported in the Wall Street Journal between homosexuals and African Americans regarding average household incomes, percentage of college graduates, percentage of those holding professional managerial positions, percentage of those who have taken overseas vacations. Have either African Americans or homosexuals ever been denied the right to vote? Ever faced legal segregation? Ever denied access by law to public drinking fountains and restrooms? Ever denied by law access to businesses and restaurants?
Their high income, their education, their current status in society compared to the mean or the median income in minority families today, I mean, it's just, there's no comparison. So for them to want protection under this law and to try to further beat down the minorities and further lessen their chances of equal protection and equal chances at jobs, I just think is ludicrous.
If you look across America, homosexuals are not in conclaves as homeless people under bridges and in food lines waiting for things. These are high-income people who want to push their agenda.
I think that it really flaunts and makes a mockery of other legitimate civil rights that people have worked for years. And to give this kind of recognition is going to undermine all kinds of laws that are already on the books, and it's going to hurt a lot of people that deserve these protections.
The group must demonstrate that they are politically powerless. In the 1992 elections, the homosexual community claimed to have donated $3.4 million to Clinton's campaign and supplied many other campaigns with volunteers and contributions, making them one of the most financially powerful political forces today. Their political power was further evidenced by the appointment of militant lesbian activist Roberta Achtenberg as the nation's top fair housing official.
The homosexual lobbyists, the homosexual groups in this country are well-funded, well-connected to powerful politicians.
Well, we're a powerful voting force now. I think that we have a pretty solid role in the Democratic Party. We have friends in Congress.
We have more support on Congress than non-supporters. There are many people that come out repeatedly in the D.C. city government. All of the city council members have come out repeatedly in favor of gay rights.
Homosexuality is defined as a behavior by the act of sex with members of the same sex. It does not qualify for minority status classification because behavior or conduct is irrelevant. As recently as 1986, the U.S. Supreme Court Chief Justice Burger ruled in Bowers v. Hartwick that, in constitutional terms, there is no such thing as a fundamental right to commit homosexual sodomy.
Elevated civil rights status should not be granted to homosexuals any more than it's granted to any other group in our society where there has been no real reason for granting that status, and particularly in an area where a large percentage of the population regards such conduct to be immoral.
No one should have special rights or privileges or minority status because of their sexual behavior. We don't have it for people who are polygamous. We don't have it for people who have affairs on their wives or husbands.
The idea that the Founding Fathers or that our Constitution somehow enshrines within it civil rights or special human rights for interest groups or for behavior groups, homosexuals, whatever kind of behavior group you want to come up with. That's totally false, totally contrary to the understanding of the fathers.
Our intent is to see that everyone is treated fair and equal, and they are being treated equal under the law as a citizen of America. Right. But their behavior should not dictate special preference for them.
This is a matter of good law versus bad law. And it is bad law to codify into public policy a special right and a special protection based on nothing other than what you do in the privacy of your own bedroom.
4 basic myths have been advanced by militant homosexual leaders over the years. These myths have become the foundation on which the gay political platform has been built. The already mentioned myth that homosexuality meets the qualifications of a minority, that 10% of the population is homosexual, that homosexuality is genetic, hormonal, or biological, and as a result, homosexuals cannot change and become heterosexual. The 10% figure taken from Alfred Kinsey's infamous sex study included prisoners, sex offenders, and child molesters as participants. Dr. Paul Gebhardt, a partner in the Kinsey study, has admitted that the 10% figure was incorrect. All recent national studies place the homosexual population at around 1%. Confronted with these facts, gay leaders are only now admitting that the inflated percentage was used for political purposes.
The thing about the 1 in 10, I think people probably always did know that it was inflated, but it was a nice number that you could point to, that you could say 1 in 10, and it's a really good way to get people to visualize that we're here.
There are people who believe that they are born homosexual. They have been taught that, and having been taught that, they accept that. And of course, if that's true, then there's no way that change could ever take place. But that's simply not true. Scientific studies have shown that genes are not the problem.
Now, some people will say, well, they're born this way. There is no evidence, there is no conclusive evidence that homosexuality is predetermined.
You're not born with it. It is something that you adapt yourself to. It's something that you choose.
Well, I think one makes a choice to be gay. I'm not sure that there is enough research to prove whether or not a person is born with genetic proclivities toward being gay. As a person with a psychological background, I know for me it was a choice that I made around 30, and there were times when I was real ambivalent about it. It's a real hard choice to make because it's an unpopular one.
It seems to me that the whole gay and lesbian music was about choice. It was about choice to begin with. People get the right to choose who they love.
Can someone who has had a homosexual struggle see a change in his life leading to complete heterosexuality? The answer is yes.
What I do is something called reparative therapy. It's not only possible to diminish the behavior, but it's possible to diminish the intensity of the homosexual attraction and to increase heterosexual feelings.
I know they can change. I was a practicing homosexual for 17 years, and I've been free of that for 13.
I've been out of the gay life now for 8 years.
God has healed me of my homosexual attractions. God has healed me of that need for a heavy emotional bond, overtly emotional bond with other men.
God set me free 13 years ago when I accepted Jesus as Lord and Savior. So I know that the change is possible. I've worked in this kind of ministry, in the ministry to homosexuals, for 8 years, and time and again I've seen people transformed by the power of Jesus Christ. It isn't an easy thing. It is a deeply rooted problem. Most of us did have those feelings very, very early on, and they're rooted in early hurts and rejections.
I had mixed up feelings. I became gender confused. I wanted to become a woman to satisfy the inward needs that I had. And through the blood of Jesus and through the understanding of what God wanted in my life, for his love for me, he showed me my true self, and I truly now am a heterosexual man.
Homosexuality is a sin. No more sinful, no less sinful than other sins. It is forgivable. God saves people who are involved in homosexuality.
Don't get sucked into the gay agenda. Don't get sucked into the unquestioned assumption that now you have no other choice but to join the gay community. Nonsense.
300,000 attended the extravagant March on Washington. Organizers resorted to full-page advertisements in gay publications to lure as many sympathizers as possible to the nation's capital. Hundreds of thousands of gays, lesbians, bisexuals, sadomasochists, and transgenders were attracted by the promise of a wild 3-day sexually indulgent celebration. The purpose of the 1993 March on Washington, which was funded in part by the Presidential Inauguration Committee, was to publicize the wide-ranging platform homosexuals were demanding that Congress enact. There were 7 broad demands, encompassing 55 sub-demands for gays, lesbians, bisexuals, and transgenders. Demand number 1 repeals all sodomy laws and legalizes any and all forms of sexual expression. Age of consent laws would be changed to allow sex with youth, and dress code laws would be repealed, allowing all forms of dress or non-dress.
We want an end to the sodomy laws in this country because they have nothing to do with life or living.
I feel that they need to change the sodomy laws. This is what we're striving for, to change sodomy laws, to be able to show our sexuality in public.
It's wrong that we have laws in America that criminalize sexual behavior, things like the age of consent law and sodomy repeal, and we're going to see that those laws will fall.
Lowering the age limit may educate people and help people become more comfortable with themselves and allow them to grow.
Demand number 2 diverts massive funds from the defense budget to cover AIDS patients' medical expenses. It calls for taxpayers to fund cosmetic sex change operations for transgenders and supply needles to IV drug addicts. Demand number 3 legalizes marriages between members of the same sex. Legal adoption, custody, and foster care would also be allowed within these new homosexual family structures.
We have marriages just as other people have marriages, and we want to have the same kind of benefits from the federal government.
Demand number 4 requires full inclusion of lesbians, gays, bisexuals, and transgenders in education, childcare, and school counseling programs. Demand number 5 requires that contraceptives and unrestricted abortion services be made available to all people, regardless of age. Demand number 6 provides taxpayer funding for artificial insemination of lesbians and bisexuals and forbids religious-based concerns about homosexuality from being expressed. Demand number 7 requires organizations such as the Boy Scouts of America to accept homosexual scoutmasters.
When you talk about the strides that have been made in the gay and lesbian community, I mean, it's good news and bad news. I mean, what's ironic is that this terrible, awful disease, which has taken so many of our friends and lovers away from us, has been the same thing that has gelled us together as a community. And I think it's ironic because it's really because of this disease that we've all gathered much more political strength.
We've had over 100 co-sponsors of the federal lesbian and gay civil rights bill the last session of Congress, so we have a lot of people that I think we can consider our friends. Kennedy is one of the main forefront people as far as pushing that bill through.
We have certainly increased the number of our friends in Congress. We've got more energy, more resources, more people with a much higher level of optimism. We've got to keep moving people into office on every level. We cannot step back for a minute. We've got to keep our constituents not for a minute believing that now is the time to lay back. Now is not the time to lay back. We got to move our agenda while we've got a window of opportunity.
We've had some big legislative successes over the last few years, including the passage of the Hate Crime Statistics Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act. And we believe it's time to pass a federal lesbian and gay civil rights bill.
We all know we're going to see an executive order, see a civil rights bill in the very near future.
We're here to demonstrate that the queer community in the United States is united, and we're going to do everything that we can in order to make sure that we get the legislative power that we deserve.
The government does not respond. We are going to make the government respond.
If they keep with us, then maybe we're going to have to start throwing bombs to make them stop.
We're young, we're queer, we're gonna rule the world. We're young, we're queer, we're gonna rule the world.
These guys are on the move. They're not only staying with the military and the Supreme Court and the House and the Senate, but they're coming into the states, and they're trying to put in laws at the city level, at the community level, at the county level, at the state level.
And make no mistake about it, we will not stop until we have achieved our freedom, our justice, and our pursuit of happiness.
For the first time in American history, a gay and lesbian inaugural ball was held in honor of the president's election. Throughout the program, Bill Clinton, via videotape, thanked the gay community for its support and financial contribution. In return, the gay community cheered Bill Clinton as the president they put into office.
I just want to thank the gay and lesbian community for your courage and your commitment. I have a vision, and you're a part of it.
The election of Bill Clinton was the single most significant event in the struggle for lesbian and gay civil rights.
We believe in the new administration, and we want to support it. We could not stay home and let this go on without us.
It's our government now. It's our government now.
What you see behind you is a plan for Mr. Clinton, because all of what you see here, Bill Clinton, through his executive offices, appointments, and administrative departments, can do himself without Congress. Although, of course, Congress has got to come up behind and also push. We have a whole other agenda for the 103rd Legislative Congress.
Clinton is a friend of ours, and he's going to take care of all gay and lesbians' rights, and he's going to shake up the country.
We're watching you, Bill. We're keeping our eyes on you. We're keeping our big queer eyes on you. And Al too. And Al too. We like Al. He's cuter.
Many of those involved in churches, schools, and businesses are concerned about the ramifications should homosexuals be granted minority status.
Well, if Congress should have the misfortune to include homosexuals within the 1964 Civil Rights Act as a specially protected class, I think it would have a very disastrous effect on our society. It would mean that people, against their own religious principles, would perhaps have to hire such people.
You're going to see government using the force of law to say to you in your business, you're going to have to hire this person because he is a homosexual.
If you have, in some small town in Mississippi, a person that comes in as homosexual and says, I want a job, and for whatever reason you don't hire that person, you run the risk of being sued and put out of business. It is a mistake for lots of reasons, including the additional burden on small business men and women.
Special privileges for homosexuals would allow one more reason to file a lawsuit, one more way that a small business could find itself blackmailed politically or economically.
The lengths to which they will go and the legal problems this would cause if we dared to put it into the Civil Rights Act are unimaginable at this point.
Gay activists have wasted no time in pushing their agenda into schools across America. Under the guise of AIDS education and multiculturalism, homosexuals are promoting their lifestyle to children beginning in preschool and kindergarten. Books such as Heather Has Two Mommies and Daddy's Roommate are currently being used in many private and public schools and libraries without the knowledge of parents. In addition, the Playbook for Kids About Sex is being made available to elementary school children and gives specific instructions on various methods of masturbation. Michael Swift writes in Gay Community News, "We shall sodomize your sons, emblems of your feeble masculinity. We shall seduce them in your schools, in your dormitories, in your gymnasiums, in your locker rooms, in your sports arenas, in your seminaries, in your youth groups." Project 10, named after the myth that 1 person in 10 is homosexual, was spawned in 1984 in Los Angeles, California. Its goal, according to its lesbian founder, schoolteacher Virginia Uribe, was to persuade school children, beginning in kindergarten, to accept homosexual behavior as normal and desirable. For her efforts, Uribe was given the Award for Creative Leadership in Human Rights by the National Education Association.
The state courts must be used to force the school districts to disseminate accurate information about homosexuality. They need to hear, the kids need to hear this. They need to hear the latest scientific information on the subject of homosexuality, and that's something that all kids need to hear, not just gay and lesbian kids. Starting from kindergarten, again, and working its way all the way through high school. This idea of talking about it one time in high school, well, we know that doesn't work. We need to start tackling this at the very early ages.
We're an organization of gay and lesbian teachers working against homophobia in schools.
One of the things that sex education does in the public schools is to tell the kids that there is no difference between homosexual lifestyle and heterosexual lifestyle. The aim of that is basically to break down any type of what they would call prejudice against the homosexual lifestyle. So basically what Americans have to understand is that the agenda on the homosexuals is aimed at the children.
The young boys are so vulnerable to this because there's a period of time in their life, you know, when they like boys. I mean, they don't want to like girls. They want to stay with boys. And if you bring in the homosexual agenda into that educational type of system, the homosexuals are going to just say, well, of course you don't like girls. Well, you're one of us. And it is a serious, serious matter. I mean, people don't realize that we're going to lose thousands and thousands and thousands of good heterosexuals to the homosexual revolution.
As a school board member, I'm extremely concerned that the homosexual activists across the United States are trying to use public schools and tax dollars to promote their agenda. What they are asking school boards across America to do is bypass the parents.
I think the problem that I have with special rights legislation based on sexual preference is it takes the authority and the instruction of parents and undermines it systematically. I think that it shouldn't be the role of government to teach a child something else in school that is radically different than what they're learning at home.
I'm very much behind the parents who do not think this is an appropriate kind of teaching for their children. This is not the kind of lesson we want to teach children in schools, particularly, I say this as former Secretary of Education, when our children are last in the industrialized world in math and science, the last thing we should be doing is fooling around with this kind of thing. They should be learning the basic skills. But on that part of the school's function, where it's to teach values, it must teach the values that parents want to be taught, not somebody's idea of what children should learn in order to be enlightened.
We project the voice of freedom forward beyond ourselves to the youth of today and to the generations of tomorrow.
We're here, we're gay, we're in the PTA. We're here, we're gay, we're in the PTA.
This is war. As far as I'm concerned, there's no room for conscientious objectors. We have got to be involved in this war.
Americans have to understand that this has been carefully orchestrated, it has been carefully carried out, and we are now in the stages of a lot of their agenda being brought to pass. And if the American people don't educate themselves and speak up against this issue, our children are going to be the losers.
Do you understand, America, that 12% of the little boys and girls growing up today are going to be lesbians and gays, and they are not going to be called faggot and dyke and queer and sissy? We are going to save our children!
The impact on the churches is going to be devastating. If a Sunday school teacher, youth director, or choir member declared they were homosexual and the church asked them to resign, the church then would have a major lawsuit on its hands. The churches who refuse to perform homosexual marriages will lose their tax exemption because they have not complied with what the court has declared to be public policy.
It redefines the family. No longer do we have a family consisting of mother and father, children, What you're going to have now is a family consisting of anybody who wants to shack up for a while for whatever reason.
I think our definitions of marriages, of relationships, of families really need to be expanded. We need to acknowledge in a legal and social way the reality of the range of different relationships people have in our society. Men having relationships with men, women with women, men with women, triads, group marriages.
I mean, I imagine if somebody, if everybody was all okay about it, 3 people would be all right.
Love's what makes a family.
There were some threesomes married today. Do you think that's right?
Well, who's to say what's right and what's not right? I think that's what this whole thing is about.
It was their choice.
I can't impose my values on someone else. If it's right for them, then I think that's great.
This is a movement that is mobilized, that has shown, while the right wing accuses us of being anti-family, has shown that we know incredibly well how to build family.
This is Eliza. She's 2.5. We adopted her in Minnesota. And this is Lydia, who's 1, and we adopted her in China this fall. Is this a family? This is a family. This is the 4 of us.
In fact, in the inaugural parade, we had a redefinition. President Clinton included a float, Families of America, I think it was. And 2 of the people were 2 lesbians. And the whole intent was to redefine family.
Obviously, homosexuality strikes at the very root of the family, is ripping apart the very definition of family, destructive to family as we know it. Yeah, you bet your life. It's a total rejection of the basic building block of society.
Due to the media's support of the homosexual agenda, the average American has been kept from learning about the dark realities entrenched in the homosexual lifestyle. While not all homosexuals are involved in these excesses, freedom to practice all extremes without restraints are firmly incorporated into the gay political platform.
To most people, when they think about homosexuals, as pictured in most of the media, it's 2 guys, 2 young guys, 2 middle-aged guys, who simply have very deep affection for each other. They want to be partners through life, help each other financially, and so on. The national media does not tell us anything about the abhorrent lifestyle of these people.
Homosexuality tends to be very compulsive, whether it's at an emotional level or emotional and sexual or just plain sexual level. It's very compulsive, very controlling. So, like I said, it could range anywhere from mutual masturbation all the way up to defecating on one another.
The ingestion of feces, that he engages in such things as anal intercourse, that he engages in such things that's known as fisting, in which one partner takes his fist and it's inserted in the anus of the other person.
The ingestion of urine, urinating on one another, it's called golden showers. They do rimming, where they lick one another's rectums. These are things that people really don't realize are going on, and it's all part of the behavior disorder that goes along with homosexuality.
When I first moved to the city, I was very naive about this, but after a couple of years, after I'd seen these things happen in bathhouses and stuff, it just gave me the creeps. After a while, I knew this was abnormal. 23-year-old men with colostomy bags. Everybody in San Francisco that I knew was getting into this S&M. It was like a spiral funnel. I mean, everybody was gravitating towards this intense sex.
We call it playing on the edge. And so a lot of people that doesn't appeal to, but that could be a cutting for scarification. It can be breath control, where you actually, you have a person's life in your hands. Heavy whipping scenes leave permanent scars. So, and that is a very normal, extreme end of SM.
We use rope, we use chains, we use whips, just like the people sort of make jokes about, but we use them in ways that bring people closer together rather than move people further apart.
I am into heavy play with whips, crops. I like electricity.
Anything that you can find in a hardware store, we know how to play with real well.
These men that have anonymous so-called sex with hundreds and hundreds of different partners, spreading disease from one to the other, traveling across the country. We have not just a moral breakdown, but we've got a very decided health hazard.
I've had so many sexual partners that they're without number. At one point, I know that one night I had at least 50 different partners in one night. I was more normal as opposed to an exception to the rule.
According to the British Journal of Sexual Medicine, homosexuals are 18 times more likely than heterosexuals to have sex with an underage person. In Riverside, California, outraged parents are concerned about the well-being of their children here at this public park where homosexuals openly practice sex acts in broad daylight.
The average is between 100 and 150 men a day that walk down this bike path, one at a time, wearing different clothing according to their sexual perversion. And they take the dirt paths off into the brush, they meet one another, and they do their sexual perversions right there in the open. They're in there for an average of 15 to 20 minutes. Then they come out one at a time, walk into the park with the children. I've seen them talking with the children. I've seen them approach children. If it was a heterosexual problem, it would be taken care of and it wouldn't be permitted. However, because these are homosexuals and so many rights and privileges and ordinances, city ordinances, have been provided that protect them, all of the agencies are afraid and fearful to take any action against them.
If you give homosexuals special rights in America, first of all, you've opened Pandora's box to every deviant behavior group logically being able to line up and bang on the same door and insist on special rights for themselves. You have totally destroyed, really, a realistic understanding of human rights.
Homosexuals today should not be discriminated against in ordinary conduct and generally are not. They're entitled to the same constitutional rights of free speech. If anything, they have used free speech to the point where their conduct is probably offensive to most people.
The church, the state, hormones will decide my fate. The church, the state, hormones will decide my fate.
All of these groups, the sadomasochists, the pedophiles, the transsexuals, all were marching in the gay rights parade. The gay agenda is to have sex in any way you please.
We will not be able to live within this country as full human beings until we have the right to love whom we love, when we love, and where we love.
And I have tremendous fears of the resulting society that will emerge if Americans, black and whites, do not stand up to this one push that's being made in our country today.
The notion that we can be indifferent toward homosexuality or heterosexuality, that it's just a flip of the coin, is really a very backward notion. No society can survive, obviously, unless it comes full forward in favor of heterosexuality. And no society in its right mind would do anything but that. That doesn't mean one is one bashes homosexuals or is cruel or seeks to wreak vengeance on them. What it does mean is that one is very clear about what the preferred style of life is.
The whole understanding of constitutional government in America is based on a biblical heritage. John Adams, our second president, said, "Our Constitution was designed only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate for the government of any other." James Madison, the chief architect of our Constitution, puts it like this: "We have staked the whole of our political institutions on the capacity of mankind to govern themselves according to the Ten Commandments of God." The problem today is we've lost our understanding of that because we really do not understand constitutionally what America was built on, because we've lost the understanding of the biblical basis for that Constitution. And that is really the core of the crisis. So until really there is a change in the hearts of the American people, the representatives of the American people, cannot be expected to change. It's totally naive and illogical of us to expect our representatives to force us to get moral.
I don't know what you want to call it family values, moral values, but values are very important. I think that's what made America great. And this will be one further degradation of our great country. And we cannot allow it to happen. It's important that people in America rise up and express their indignation and make it clear they're not going to tolerate it. Because what is at stake is the future of our boys and girls, but also what is at stake is the future of America.
I didn't have a strong sense of a male role model in my life. My school years were basically hell on earth. From the age of about 5 years old till a senior in high school, I can best describe my upbringing as being one of insecurity. I was the butt of most people's jokes in school growing up.
When I was a kid, I was very much a tomboy. I got made fun of a lot. I was teased by my peers a lot.
I used to take ballet lessons and all sorts of things when I was a little girl, up to the age of about 4. And at that point I was sexually violated by a teenage boy.
When I went through puberty, the longings for male love and the genuine need for male attention that I had inside, which I feel is common to boys and girls growing up, became sexualized.
My mind correlated femininity with abuse or violation, and therefore I was to reject anything that put me at risk. And so I promoted more activities in my life that were more masculine.
And I was very attracted to the masculine sort of lifestyle of being in the military and wearing a uniform and that sort of thing. So I joined the Army at 18. And sure enough, my whole company was full of lesbians. From the captain on down to privates, I mean, there was lots of lesbians. And that's when I had my first lesbian lover.
My last year in high school, I invested in dating 3 boys at one time and tried to fit the norm, but it just didn't fit. I didn't have it in me. There was no real connection emotionally with the men. And then at that point, my first year in college, I decided that I was a lesbian, I was gay.
I was doomed from the first time I walked into a gay bar. There was such a magnetic pull, such a drive to go in there, I don't think I could have turned back even if I had wanted to. And because I wasn't raised with any Christian influence in my life, I didn't have a big standard of moral values, of what was right and what was wrong. And when I went into the gay bar, I really found people that I felt I could be comfortable with, people that I was just like. No longer was I the misfit.
Went from one lover to the next, looking for the perfect lover. I really wanted to find somebody I could spend the rest of my life with and sort of emulate, heterosexuality as far as marriage and getting a house together and settling down. That was really my heart's desire. And I just really wanted to be loved. I wanted to find someone that would stay with me and be with me for the rest of my life. And however, in the midst of all this, I did have some conviction that homosexuality perhaps wasn't God's will. I had actually read it in the Bible one time and it really horrified me. The thought that I might not go to heaven really horrified me.
And because I was willing to do whatever I needed to find love and acceptance, I was willing to become a drag queen. And really for the last 4 years of my homosexuality, I was involved in the world of female impersonation.
A very good friend of mine who was still in the Navy at that time, the Naval Investigative Service had gone through the barracks on one of their searches for drugs and they'd found her diary. And in her diary she talked about her lover. Well, they called her in and they questioned her and she admitted that she was indeed a lesbian, and so they decided they were going to discharge her as a lesbian. 2 or 3 weeks before that, we had gone to the first gay and lesbian march in Washington, D.C. And I had spent 3 days listening to people talking about gay rights, and I had gotten really pumped up from that. So my idea was we're going to go on base, and I was going to throw this Molotov cocktail at the Naval Investigative Service building just to make a show of things, just to show them that we were angry, that someone was mad at them. Well, as it turned out, we went on base and things got really carried away And we ended up burning down the Naval Investigative Service building.
I was discovering how lonely I was, always looking for Mr. Right to come along on a white horse to sweep me off my feet, that we could have the house with the picket fence and the golden retriever, and I just found that Prince Charming never was going to ride by.
They tried me, and they found me guilty, and they sentenced me to 7 years in prison. And during the whole proceedings, the court proceedings and everything, in my heart I felt maybe this is a blessing in disguise, because I knew my life was fairly well out of control.
I said, what I really, really need, God, whoever you are, is to be loved unconditionally. I have this big, huge hole in my life, and I need that filled.
I had a Bible, and I was looking at it, and I opened it up one day, and it was like the words came alive to me. It was like a veil was torn from my eyes, and I totally understood that this was indeed the Word of God, and that it was true. And if it was true that being a lesbian was wrong, it was sinful, and I wasn't going to go to heaven, I was going to go to hell. So I got down beside my bed there in prison. I gave my heart and life to Jesus Christ.
And up to this point in the gay community that I was involved in, it was completely unheard of that homosexuality was something that could be changed, because we all had been completely convinced it was something we were born with. It's not that any of us researched that on our own. We just bought the line that we were being told in the media, that you were born that way, and that was just fine with us, because if I had thought that I wasn't born that way, then maybe I would be responsible to do something about it.
I thought I was born gay because it had always been like that for me. It always felt different. And so when somebody tells you, you know, that's a sin, you've got to stop it, it's hard for you to understand that without the Spirit of God enlightening you to it, because you just know that all your life you've been this way.
I realized that Jesus was someone whom I could trust, whom I could give my life to. And basically what I was concerned about is that when I died, I would go to heaven.
That night I gave my life to the Lord and just gave up all my dreams and desires about homosexuality. I was willing to do whatever it took to overcome that.
I had never met anybody anywhere out of the hundreds of people I knew that had ever walked away from homosexuality. But I decided that I could trust God a lot more than I could trust what the media was telling me, what my gay psychologist was telling me, and God's truth was burned deep within my heart.
So the Lord began to show me the root causes to the lesbian lifestyle for me, and that was about 7 years ago, and I've been in a process during that time of tackling those things, so to speak. Okay, Lord, I see that, I see that I felt this rejection, and letting the Lord into that area of my life, and He's brought the healing. So now I totally identify as a heterosexual. The lesbian identity really, about 2 years ago, really left me. I still have struggles, I still have temptations, but they're far less. Each year they get less and less. And I'm looking forward to perhaps getting married if that's in God's plan for me.